I am Dr. Earl Reynolds. I am an anthropologist by profession. I'm also skipper of the yacht Phoenix, about which you will be hearing soon. I'm going to tell you the story of the testing of the constitutionality of a law and of what happened as a result of that particular testing. The yacht Phoenix arrived in Honolulu in May of 1958, having successfully completed a circumnavigation of the world. On board were 5 people: my wife, my son, my daughter, a Japanese yachtsman, and myself. When we arrived here in this harbor, we found quite a bit of excitement going on. In fact, there was excitement going on throughout the town. The cause of this was a small yacht which had arrived a few days previously, known as the Golden Rule. Now, on board this yacht, the Golden Rule, were 4 men, 3 of them Quakers, who had announced their intention of sailing into the nuclear test zone near Eniwetok in defiance of a regulation which had been put out by the Atomic Energy Commission forbidding their entry. Now, we arrived here, it was May the 2nd, I think? May the 2nd? Yes. May the 2nd. We arrived here May the 2nd, and the following day there was a trial of these 4 men for violating an injunction against the departure of the Golden Rule toward the West Pacific and into this area of the open ocean into which Americans were forbidden to enter. We became very interested in the case of the Golden Rule because, first of all, they were neighboring yachtsmen. I had worked in Hiroshima for 3.5 years as an anthropologist for the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. I knew something of the effects of atomic radiation. I knew that the continuation of nuclear testing represented a definite hazard to the health of the world. For these and for many other reasons, we became very interested in the Golden Rule case and followed the trial. We talked to the lawyers concerned. We talked to many people who were in on this, and we did quite a bit of library research, too. I won't burden you with everything we found out. I'll just give you very briefly some of our conclusions. First of all, it was our conclusion that the testing of nuclear weapons in the Pacific areas by the United States, by our country, is illegal and unconstitutional. And moreover, that the regulation which forbids the entrance of Americans into that vast area of open ocean, 390,000 square miles, that particular regulation is illegal. We had some thoughts also about the Marshall Islanders. We felt, for example, that the Marshallese had received very poor treatment at the hands of the United States, that in fact we Americans had violated our trust agreement when we took over the Marshalls by our treatment of the natives of the Marshalls, by moving them and by exposing them to nuclear radiation, as we have definitely done. We felt that we should become more interested in this case than that of mere bystanders. Early in June, we sailed from Honolulu on the last leg of our voyage around the world back to Hiroshima, Japan, by way of the high seas. At the time that we left here, we were not certain in our mind as to what our future course would be. We did not know whether we would enter the zone or not. We knew that we had 3 weeks in order to reach the edge of the zone, and during that 3 weeks we would make our decisions. We had many talks, we read much, we thought much during those 3 weeks, and when we were a couple of days' sail to this side of the zone, all of us on board the Phoenix were determined that we were going to enter. Before we left Honolulu, we'd given Jessica and Ted an opportunity to do something else during this trip if they so desired. How did you feel about that, Jessica, when we asked you what your feelings were?
Well, I had the choice of staying in Honolulu or going with the boat. And I felt that I should go with the boat because this is our world, and I have a right to fight for it, and everyone should have a right to fight for it.
And Ted also, of course, had talked to me quite a bit about this problem. How did you feel about it, Ted?
I had made my decision long before on the basis of my studying, and I thought it was the only thing to do.
As for Nick Mikami, I can speak for him by saying that he was from Hiroshima, Japan, and there was no doubt as to his feelings. My wife felt very much, as did the men of the Golden Rule, that this was primarily a moral issue, that the testing of nuclear devices, and in fact war itself, is immoral and wrong, and therefore should be stopped by any means available. When we were about 200 miles east of the zone, we were approached at night by a Coast Guard ship which pulled alongside late at night and offered a series of instructions and warnings and asked us if we intended to enter the zone or to go around it. We answered, enter. This was a very dangerous maneuver, pulling alongside of us like that in the dark, and we were rather frightened at the possible consequences. The consequences, of course, would have been to the Phoenix, not to the Coast Guard cutter. At any rate, we continued on into the zone, and on the morning of July the 1st, we were 65 miles approximately inside the zone when this same Coast Guard ship, which had been following us for 2 days, again pulled alongside and ordered us to heave to. That is, to pull down our sails and stop the forward progress of our ship. I asked the captain of this ship what his authority was for stopping an unarmed ship in peace times on the high seas, and he cited some regulations, the numbers of certain regulations. I asked several other questions, including asking him if he was aware there was a Japanese citizen on board, and he said that that was no concern of his. At any rate, after enough questions to establish the situation, I hove to, the Coast Guard cutter put a small boat over the side, and we were boarded by armed men. I was placed under arrest. This, of course, was on the open ocean, on the high seas, hundreds of miles from any land. I was given the choice of sailing my ship under the command of the armed captors to Kwajalein, which is a Navy base several hundred miles to the south, or of being towed to that same Navy base. In order to preserve the safety of the ship, I elected to sail it out under their orders. We therefore set sail to the south. Meanwhile, a Navy destroyer pulled alongside, and the Coast Guard ship went on to Honolulu. From thenceforth, we were under the control of the Navy destroyer, which gave their signals to the armed men on board our ship, and the armed men in turn ordered me to proceed. We arrived in Kwajalein on the 4th of July. We were kept in Kwajalein for 4 days, and after that, my wife, my daughter, and I were flown back to Honolulu. We arrived here on the 8th of July. Ted and Nick Mikami remained aboard the Phoenix in Kwajalein. We on board the Phoenix entered the nuclear test zone to test the constitutionality of this AEC law, amongst other things. When we were arrested, I announced to the captain of the Coast Guard ship that I considered his arrest of the Phoenix on the high seas to be illegal, and that I was permitting this arrest under protest.
Well, you certainly knew that you were going to be stopped. What did you hope to accomplish by your actions?
We hope to make people, the American people, say, why would an American family and a Japanese from Hiroshima on a world pleasure cruise feel strongly enough about this question to wish to risk their lives in their boat to sail down here. Perhaps they must have some motivation that's worth our considering. We hope to start people thinking and questioning.
Well, do you think that you accomplished that? Do you think that many Americans were concerned with that question?
I think that very few Americans know anything about the fact that the Phoenix sailed into the nuclear testing area.
It was widely reported on radio and television and the newspapers.
Well, yes, but you must realize that just the factual report that my husband was arrested inside the nuclear testing area does not give the background for our reasons for doing it, or call upon any individual reader to say, this is something I should think about.
Well, what were your reasons for doing it?
For many reasons. Our boat was built in Hiroshima. My husband had been there studying the effects of atomic radiation. He'd been working for the AEC, so he had some very definite knowledge of the actions of the AEC and the security restrictions, in many cases, restrictions which seem at least unnecessary, and at most a direct violation of the freedoms we're trying to protect. we've met many people in Honolulu who said, reporters and people from the radio and teachers and ministers who said, we think these men from the Golden Rule are absolutely right, or we think they're justified in making this protest as American citizens. They should be allowed to protest. But we can't say so. I mean, we can't get up in our classes and talk about this, or we can't get up in our churches and say that the United States is not behaving in a Christian manner to continue testing nuclear weapons.
Why can't they?
Well, the whole line was we've got to trust our government. We've got to go along with our government.
Well, Mrs. Reynolds, is there anything wrong in their wanting to trust the government?
No, there's nothing wrong in it, except that the people are the government, or at least in America they're supposed to be. And therefore, it seems to me that if the leaders that we have elected seem not to be carrying out the what we believe is the proper course, we have a right to question them. And if they pass a law, especially if they pass a law without due act of Congress or anybody that we have elected, which we believe to be unconstitutional, we agree with Justice Douglas, who says that it is not only the right but the duty of an American citizen to question that law. And in some cases, to set up a test case by breaking the law with the understanding that one is willing to accept the consequences if the courts uphold the law.
I think one may reasonably ask, why this concern about the fallout from the testing of hydrogen bombs and nuclear weapons? Well, as an anthropologist, as a specialist in the growth of children, and as one who's worked in this problem in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I have become very interested in this problem myself. Radiation fallout is a new addition to the hazards that human beings have been subjected to in recent years. As the years have gone on, the human body has been more and more subjected to the hazards of radiation in such things as X-rays, increased use of X-rays. Natural radiation we have always had with us, and any type of radiation on the human body is presumed to be to a greater or lesser degree of bad consequence. In terms of the living population, an excess of radiation can give such diseases as leukemia or bone cancer. If the strontium-90, which is the poisonous component of the hydrogen bombs, in excess in the children's bones, can give rise to bone cancers. But to a certain degree, even more terrible to think about is the matter of the generations yet unborn, of the children yet to come, who haven't asked, whose opinions haven't been asked, as to whether they themselves are satisfied with the situation that now exists. All radiation which attacks the germplasm, the germ cells, can possibly affect, through mutations, can possibly affect the offspring of future generations. And this is a very dangerous situation which exists in the world today, and I should say that almost every geneticist, hereditary specialist throughout the world is deeply concerned about the fallout from nuclear weapons, because this is an added increment of danger to the world's population yet to be born. How many children will die? How many children will be malformed? How many children will have congenital anomalies at birth? We don't know in terms of figures. But the geneticists feel that definitely there will be some damage done, and it may run to a considerable figure. For that reason, anything which will stop the testing of nuclear weapons is bound in the long run to be for the benefit of humanity. Therefore, I'm speaking to you as an anthropologist. I'm speaking to you as a family man myself. I'm speaking to you as a scientist. who has studied the situation rather carefully. I'm speaking to you also since I have broken this law which prohibits the entry of people into this area. I'm speaking to you as a convicted criminal at the moment awaiting appeal on a sentence.